Hey there, I'm Ceallach and I do things, and today I'm reviewing Villette by Charlotte Bronte. You know nothing, Lucy Snow.
Hey Lucy, I remember your name.
Alright, bad pun is bad. Most people are familiar with Charlotte Bronte's novel Jane Eyre, but what a lot of people don't know is that she wrote a bunch of other novels. Villette is partially based on Charlotte Bronte's own experiences while working abroad as a teacher. She wrote this novel after her sisters Anne and Emily had died, which partially explains why the tone of Villette is so damn depressing. To summarize, Villette follows Lucy Snow visiting her godmother. During her visit, Lucy looks after Polly, a young girl who is visiting while her father is away on business. Her mother is dead, presumably dying from we don't like moms in literature disease. Polly befriends Graham, the widow's teenage son. Lucy is just sort of a bystander in these chapters, observing Polly and Graham's interactions. Lucy's kinda boring. Anyways, Lucy later tries her luck by taking a leap of faith to work abroad on the continent. On the boat, she meets Ginevra, who is pretty obnoxious and self-absorbed, but she's also kind of the most fun to read about. Lucy briefly becomes a governess before she meets Madame Beck, who is impressed by Lucy's mad governess skills, and offers her a job as an English teacher, despite not being able to speak French. Because who the hell would go to a country where you don't speak the language and decide to teach English? Yeah, that never happens. However, she's a pretty good teacher despite her lack of language skills, and later she meets Dr. John, a fellow Englishman. She also finds out that he is one of Ginevra's secret admirers, and Lucy gets even more irritated with Ginevra than she already was, because Ginevra was kind of a pain in the ass. And then she finds out that Dr. John, who is Lucy's, perfect cinnamon roll bay, guy, and he's not even Ginevra's favorite suitor. What? She's just stringing Dr. John along for presents, and also for shits and giggles. Later on, Lucy also meets Monsieur Paul, the literature teacher, and he tries to teach her how to act like a proper lady. This goes about as well as one might think. Lucy becomes lonely and depressed. Well, more lonely and depressed than she already was. And one day, while wandering in Villette in a depressed stupor, she passes out and is saved by Dr. John. Dr. John, it turns out, is Graham Bretton. What? And neither of them had recognized each other. Graham and Lucy become friends, and while she admires him, Lucy never says or does anything, because with his education and his status as a town doctor, he's way out of her league. Graham also gives up on Ginevra after she's rude to his mom. And, not for the whole gold digger thing. This leaves Graham single just in time for Polly and her dad to show up again, and they now have inherited a French title. Because why the hell not? Graham and Polly meet again, and they become Lucy's OTP. Good thing Polly is legal now, or this would be really creepy. She's only 17? God damn Victorians, quicken up my shitty ship! She and Monsieur Paul become a no-TP because, while they agree to be friends, they can't quite get over the difference between their religions. Lucy is Protestant, Paul is Catholic, and neither are willing to give up on their religion to be in a relationship. Oh, well, it's the biggest mix-up that you have ever seen. My OTP's been ruined by the orange and the green. While this is going on, Lucy keeps seeing the ghost of an old nun. Ooh, spooky. One day, Lucy discovers Paul's angsty backstory while running some errands. He was engaged to marry a woman named Justine Marie, but could not marry her because his ass was broke while he was trying to earn enough money to marry her. Justine died in a convent. Could this have anything to do with the mysterious ghostly nun? No. No, actually it doesn't. This backstory helps Lucy fall for Monsieur Paul, but he's still way too Catholic for her despite his newly achieved cinnamon roll status. They try to convert each other in a spectacularly offensive chapter and eventually give up on changing each other's minds entirely. Graham and Polly get engaged. Ew. The ghost nun subplot gets a lackluster reveal. It was Ginevra's tutor dressed as a nun sneaking into the school for some of that bow chicka wow wow. Monsieur Paul leaves the school, but before he goes away, he buys Lucy a house to set up a school so she can be a strong, independent woman. Aww! They finally exchange vows of love, and Lucy promises to wait for him. Lucy's school prospers, and eventually she turns it into a boarding school. She also loosely alludes to the fact that Monsieur Paul's ship ran aground and he died at sea? What? Well, holy shit, that's a downer ending! Unlike Jane Eyre, Villette is not a typical Bildungsroman. Firstly, we start following Lucy after her childhood and early adulthood. In fact, we know next to nothing about this time in her life. We only really know what Lucy wants us to know. She omits details and makes an unreliable narrator of herself. This is also incredibly frustrating. In Emily Bronte's novel, Wuthering Heights, an unreliable narrator is also used. However, in that case, the narrator was Nellie Dean, a servant who mostly stayed out of the main action and observed the other characters. We aren't really meant to be invested in Nellie Dean so much as we are her story about Catherine, Heathcliff, and all of their shenanigans. Lucy Snow, on the other hand, is the main character, but rather than learning more about her, following her, doing interesting things, she spends most of the novel observing drama that goes on between other characters. This goes hand in hand with Lucy's portrayal as an outsider. She can observe all the upper-class drama between Graham, Polly, and Ginevra, but she'll never be allowed to join them. Why is that? Well, Villette is basically the embodiment of Charlotte Bronte's ultimate feminist crisis! Lucy Snow is well educated, presumably from a middle-class Protestant background, but she has no family connections, no cash, and she's not exactly winning any Miss Universe competitions anytime soon. As such, while a man like Graham, who starts out in a fairly similar situation, can get an education, become the town doctor, marry an heiress, and Lucy has no upward social mobility. Being poor, she has to earn her own living, and there were few jobs available to women at the time, and most of them revolved around childcare or domestic work. On top of that, none of these were considered important or admirable enough to allow someone from a lower class to break social barriers and move up in the world. In addition to that, there's Lucy's family. Or lack thereof. She has no connections. Polly is well off at the beginning of the novel, but thanks to family connections, she manages to become an heiress. You might even draw a comparison to Jane Eyre, Bronte's other heroine, who inherits a great deal of wealth via deus ex dead relative. Lucy, who is all alone, won't be able to have such a lucky break, meaning she can't buy her way into high society. Finally, there's beauty. At a time when a woman's marriageability was basically based on property and how much a woman could bring into a marriage, not to mention the ability to crank out like 1,000,000,000,000,000 babies. Ugh. Barring that, a middle-class woman could still move up in the world if she was beautiful and charming enough to snag a rich, high-ranking husband. Ginevra more or less manages to do this by the end of the book. Lucy, on the other hand, is unable to do so, and attributes this to her looks, lack of wealth, and lack of family connections. Villette demonstrates clearly the struggle faced by middle-class women in Bronte's time. However, it also takes it a step further by adding a foreign element. Lucy is not just a social outsider, she is a foreigner. In a country with different customs, a different language, different religions, not only does Lucy have no upward social mobility, she'll never quite be able to blend into the town of Villette because of her nationality and religious upbringing. This further restricts her interactions, causing even more isolation and loneliness. The one character she has a shot at love with is Monsieur Paul Emmanuel. He's of the same social standing, and Lucy likes him, and he's an all-around decent guy. The problem is, he's Catholic, and for them to get married, one of them would have to give up their religion. It's kind of interesting to note that the ghost that haunts Lucy is that of a Catholic nun. The Catholic nun's ghost is a being that can represent her social isolation, her being constantly watched, her lack of social mobility, and her misgivings about Catholicism and the French as a whole. In the end, Villette is a novel about being an outsider looking in. So, does this make it a good read? To be honest, I can't recommend it the way I can recommend Jane Eyre. The pacing is slow, the tone is melancholic, and Lucy's outsider position makes her very frustrating main character to follow. She's more or less the literary equivalent of that friend who comes over to your house and lies on your couch and eats all your food and just goes on and on and on about how unfair society is and how miserable they are. You kind of want to tell them to get over themselves a little bit and go out and have fun for once. Then they give you 1,000,001 reasons why they can't, and continues to talk about how unfair and miserable things are, and just, not exactly how I want to spend a few hours of my life. As such, this is not a fun read. I'd recommend it for fans of Bronte, literary completionists, fans of period literature, and maybe feminists. But only feminists who are into history and old-timey books. And speaking of old-timey books, join me next time for a look at something near and dear to my heart. Irishmen beating the shit out of each other.
She can kill with a smile, she can wound with her eyes, and she can ruin your faith with her casual lies. And she only reveals what she wants you to see. She hides like a child, but she's always a woman to me.